I'll just say, my name is Jasmine. Jasmine Ruddy. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a community organizer with National Nurses United. I'm calling today from Ohlone Land, also known as Oakland, California. I'm going to be one of the facilitators of this workshop today, and co-facilitating with me is the amazing Maria.
Thank you, Jazz. Hi, everybody. Super excited to have you all here. I am Maria Torres-Lopez from Florida, specifically from the Seminoles land, also known as Waxahachie.
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, Maria and I are very excited to take you all through this very fun workshop today. So let's jump in because we actually do have quite a lot to cover. It's a pretty jam-packed workshop. And if you have not yet, please do introduce yourselves in the chat. Okay, so let's jump right in. So let's go quickly over what we're going to be covering in this workshop today. The purpose of this workshop is to explore goals, strategy, tactics, and escalation. We're going to be talking about this specifically in terms of running a local or state level or even a national campaign focused on Medicare for all, of course. Now we're going to start out with an overview of exactly what we mean by strategy, tactics, and escalation. Then we're going to talk about the difference between them all. We're going to talk about, what escalation is and when you might use that in your campaign. We're also going to cover a ton of different tactics, what they are and how you might use them in your community. And then for our final bit of time, we're actually going to go into some breakout groups. Depending on how many of us there are, we might do 2 small groups, and we are actually going to give you all a chance to practice these skills together and to get to know each other. And that is our plan. So I am just going to start taking us through it. So the purpose of all of this is to essentially teach you or give you a nice refresher on campaign building 101. There are 5 components to a good campaign plan. We're going to talk about identifying and building out these 5 components, and they are: number 1, objective; number 2, your goals; number 3, your strategy; number 4, your tactics; and number 5, escalation if needed. And these are the things that you will use to build any campaign that you might organize. Again, we're going to think specifically today about how all of this applies to campaigns within the movement to win Medicare for all. But this is a general framework that can apply to any campaign or any issue. Anyone can do this. Once you have these things written down and you start to map them to a timeline, you have a campaign plan. It's really that simple. So we're going to go through each of these 5 things a bit more in depth. Okay, so first and foremost, we should always start. The first thing you should do is identify what your overarching objective is before you even get to your goals. In our case, our objective together is to win and enact a Medicare for all healthcare system in the United States. Our campaign goals that we identify within this, right underneath this, should always be building towards this ultimate objective. And if they aren't, if you feel like your goals aren't working towards this overall objective, you might want to reconsider your plan, right? So that's objective. Always remember what your objective is, and that's different than your goals. But number 2, let's talk about goals. Before we get to strategy and to tactics, we first have to know what our goals are. So some of the questions that you might ask yourselves are to identify your goals are, who are we trying to influence? Or who is our organizing target? What are we asking our organizing target to do, right? In our Medicare for All campaign at National Nurses United, oftentimes this is might look like asking a member of Congress or a senator to do something that makes progress in the fight for healthcare justice, right? Maybe that is, we want them to co-sponsor federal Medicare for All legislation, or we want them to sign our Patients Over Profits pledge that candidates and elected officials can take to refuse industry donations. Or maybe it's to be, we want this person to be a more vocal and proactive supporter of Medicare for all, right? So those are some of the goals that you might come up with in a campaign. Then, in addition to identifying your overarching goal of your campaign, it's always a good idea to also break down a few more sub-goals that are going to bring your campaign to victory. If your overall goal, for example, is to get your member of Congress to co-sponsor Medicare for all, then campaign sub-goals within that might be, what you might ask yourselves, are we trying to, build public support to get this person to do that? Okay, if so, in what ways? How much? Can we quantify that into goals? Or maybe you're trying to put public pressure on that target to get them to co-sponsor Medicare for all. What kind of pressure? How? When? Right? These are the other kinds of goals that you might want to think through. When you are making your goals for your campaign, we want to share with you a little handy acronym that we hope you'll take away from this workshop today that you can remember, and that is SMART. You always want to make sure that you're making SMART goals. This is a useful acronym to help you remember the elements of what makes a good and well thought out goal. So let's talk about what the letters of SMART stand for, and you can see them here on the picture as well. So the S in SMART stands for specific. Be as specific as possible with your goal. Who is involved? Who is your organizing target or audience? Be very specific with what your goal is. We're not just trying to build support for Medicare for all, right? Be specific. The M in SMART stands for measurable. You want to be able to measure the success of your campaign. In other words, you want to get X number of people to do Y action. You want to quantify your goals, right? The A in SMART stands for achievable, right? In other words, can we do it? What's our capacity? How many people are in our group? What resources do we have? Is this goal achievable, right? The R in SMART stands for realistic. This sounds like achievable, but it's a little different. The realistic part means, will we do it? Do we care enough? Are we going to get this done? Do we want to work long-term towards this goal? Do we have sufficient time as a group to dedicate ourselves to this, right? Is this goal realistic, not just achievable? And the T in SMART stands for timely or time-bound. What's the timeline for achieving this goal, right? By what date do we want to achieve this goal? So that is the SMART acronym. Please feel free to take a screenshot of this page or ask us later if you want it. And we're happy to provide it. And we hope you'll use that in making the best goals that you can for your campaigns. Okay, so next we're going to talk about strategy. Once you've identified a goal or goals that meet those criteria, it's time to think about how you will achieve those goals. And that is what strategy means. Simply put, your strategy is your overall plan for how you want to influence your organizing target to do the thing you want them to do, right? It is your theory on how you will make the changes you want to see happen. You can think of it like your roadmap or your game plan, right? Like you can see here in the picture on this slide. It's important to note, this is the one main thing I want you to take away from today. If you take one thing away, it is important to note that your strategy is different than your tactics, which we will talk about in a few minutes. Tactics are action steps that you'll take to carry out your strategy. You should decide always your strategy first, and then choose tactics that fall into that strategy and help you advance your plan. So here's a few questions that you might ask yourselves when you're figuring out your campaign strategy, right? So again, you might ask yourselves, okay, who is our target? What decision maker or decision makers are we trying to influence? How can we influence those people or that person? Do we need to give them an opportunity to look like a hero and a champion, or do we need to pressure them? Do we need to shame them? Those are questions that might help you arrive at the strategy that's going to fit best to your campaign. Something that it can also be helpful to do here is to identify and just kind of theoretically kind of walk through a couple of different strategies, right? Play them out and how they would go, and then choose between them. By doing this, you can delineate between a few different approaches and then feel out which one feels the most appropriate. So let's give an example. Let's say your goal was to pressure your member of Congress to sign the Patients Over Profits pledge and stop taking campaign donations from the insurance, pharma, and hospital industries. So one possible strategy we might consider is publicly shaming them. We might draw attention publicly to the amount of money that they take from industry, right? Another possible route we might take or strategy we might consider is just increasing public support so that that member of Congress really feels like they kind of have the support or the backing that they need to take action in signing the pledge, right? You might consider and kind of play out both of these strategies and talk through them and then determine which one would be most impactful in your campaign, right? Okay, so that's strategy. We're going to keep moving, and apologies that we're going quickly. We have a lot we want to get through with you guys. So you've talked about strategy. Now it's time to talk about your tactics. So what exactly are tactics? Simply put, tactics are the ways that you advance your strategy, right? So strategy is the way you advance to your goals. Tactics fall within your strategy. They're the action steps you take. If your strategy is the recipe, your tactics are the ingredients. Let's consider a few examples of this, right? Let's say your strategy is focused on building public support. If so, tactics you might choose to accomplish that strategy could be driving phone calls, collecting petition signatures, maybe holding a text bank party or a phone bank party to identify more supporters, right? Here's another example. Maybe your organizing target needs to be publicly pressured. Tactics you might choose could be a press conference, a rally outside their office, letters to the editor calling them out, right? Now, again, like I said, and I'm sorry if I'm a broken record, but again, we want you to remember and take away, tactics are different than your strategy. So a rally outside your member of Congress's office is not in itself a strategy. It is one tactic that should be part of a larger plan, right? Collecting petition signatures is not in itself a strategy. It's one tactic that should be part of a larger plan. So that is a pretty quick and dirty overview, and I'm going to pass it over to Maria for our next section.
Thank you so much, Jazz. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so now let's do a quick recap, and Jazz is going to help me with the slides right here. Okay, so first, you want to make sure you have your overall objective in mind and make sure that your plan is building towards that. Second, you want to craft the SMART goal that Jazz just went over that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Then you identify how you will create the changes necessary for our goal to be achieved, and that is your strategy. And finally, you specify the tactics, those ingredients or action steps that you will utilize to carry out your strategy. Once you have your objective, goal, strategy, tactics all mapped out, and you apply them to a timeline, you have a campaign plan. Easy enough, right? Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper. Let's see what are some of the common pitfalls. So let's talk about some of the places where you can hit some snags with campaign planning. One common pitfall can be having a goal or a strategy that is vague or not achievable. An example of a vague goal will be, we need to build support in our area for Medicare for all. We need to be more specific than that. How do we do that? You also want to avoid goals that are arbitrary. For example, we want to write 10 letters to the editor without a reason why that number 10, is impactful for your goal. You also want to be careful to avoid utilizing tactics that do not help meet the goals or fit the strategy. For example, do a honk and wave to pressure our member of Congress to support Medicare for all. While they can be fun, a honk and wave is probably not the best tactic for a particular strategy, since it is unlikely to even cross your rep's radar, and therefore you will not create the pressure that you're looking for. You won't create any movement. A final best practice in working through your goal, strategy, and tactics planning is always maintaining clear communication with the organizing target's office. It's an important element of your campaign that the intended target of your pressure is aware that you're organizing. What are you doing and why you're doing it? This way, you can know that your target is noticing the pressure, know who is causing it, and most importantly, how to make it stop. So let's talk a little bit about, adding all of that, how do we escalate? Okay, so let's talk about the potential final steps of your campaign planning, which is escalation. What happens when your tactics aren't working? Sometimes it just means you should rethink your strategy and your tactics. Maybe it's just not the time to escalate. You just need a different or maybe better plan. Sometimes though, you have really made your campaign visible and you're hit a crossroads. Then it might be time to escalate. Maybe your organizing target has clearly ignored you after being given a direct chance to respond. Maybe they have said no. You might consider coming back together to chat out a new strategy or an escalation where you can take things to the next level with a new strategy, with new tactics. Escalation might mean choosing a strategy and tactics that make your target stance known. If they said no to your demand, do you have a quote? Even better, do you have a video or an audio clip of them saying that no? What kind of strategy and tactics can you build to publicize this information and let the public know about where your target stands? Once you do that, how can you capture the people's reactions to escalate further? Maybe by flooding their office with phone calls or direct action outside their office. Escalation could also look different than that. Maybe you have identified a weakness or a vulnerability they have. Do they really depend on a few key donors or endorsers who will be upset to hear that they don't support your demand? Can you call those people and let them know? This will look different for every campaign. What's important is that your group asks yourselves 2 questions before you escalate. So, do we need to escalate yet? That's the first question. Has our target said no or clearly ignored us? Did we try everything we could? It's important to answer this for yourselves honestly and not escalate too soon. If you do, you could risk alienating your target. Think of escalation as a no going back scenario. It's not to say you shouldn't do it. In lots of cases, you should. It's just it's good to be thoughtful about it. Then, if the answer is yes to the first question, to the question, do we need to escalate? Then the second question you should ask yourselves is, how should we escalate? What do we know about our target at this point and their vulnerabilities? What leverage do we have? What power do we have that will help you make a new plan with a new goal, a new strategy, and some new tactics? Okay, let's go a little bit deeper into those strategies. So now that we have that overview of the goals, the strategy, the tactics, and the escalation and their definitions, we're gonna go and take a quick step back to thinking about strategy more in depth for a few minutes. I am going to go over a really helpful tool that can help you determine your campaign strategy. This graphic shows the 4 quadrants for basic strategy types. You should use the graphics to assess your campaign and decide which box your campaigns mostly fits into. As you can see, the 4 quadrants are based on 2 factors, whether our target is with us or against us, and whether the public is with us or against us. The combination of any of these 2 factors will lead us to what type of campaign strategy we should pursue. Let's talk about all of them one at a time. Okay, so the hero strategy, which is the top left. This is where our target is with us and the public is with us. For example, let's say our members of Congress is a progressive and supports Medicare for all. They have probably been interested in doing more, but they haven't prioritized it. If someone asks them to do more, like hold a town hall, call for a hearing in X committee, etc., they will probably do it. And their district has a huge support for Medicare for all. So here, a good strategy will be to make that public support more visible to our member of Congress and use it to ask them to do more. As a result, they'll likely be a hero. That's why we call it the hero strategy. We're giving our target an opportunity to be a hero. They probably do the thing, but they need us to push them to do it. These types of campaigns are more often really positive and high road. So let's go to the second one, which is the pressure campaign, the top right corner. In this scenario, the organizing target is not with us, but the public is. So we create pressure. Let's say our member of Congress is a Democrat who doesn't support Medicare for all, even though there's a ton of support in the district. Our group might pursue a strategy to demonstrate that public support exists and that we might escalate if that original strategy doesn't work. We might ask them to meet and ask them to support. And if they say no, we let them know that we will be phone banking voters in their district to relay their lack of support. The third strategy, the political cover, which is the bottom left. This is a scenario where our organizing target wants to be with us, but just doesn't see the public support yet. It less that the public is against us and more that they are just neutral or apathetic. For example, our member of Congress says, I will support Medicare for all, but my district doesn't want it. That means our job is to build and show public support. Our group might make a plan to collect X number of signatures from the district in support of Medicare for all, and we plan to deliver action to the member of Congress at the end. The last one is stop. You just point blank stop, and it's the bottom right. Why? Let's hear about it. If the organizing target is against us and the public is against us, we should not work on it. Move on. Fortunately, this is usually not the case for Medicare for all. So when we're coming up with a strategy, whether it's local for Medicare for all organizing work or just any campaign you want to work on, you should always use this graphic and ask yourself those two questions. Is our target with us or against us? Is the public with us or against us? Based on your answers to those two questions, sort yourselves into a category and then craft a campaign strategy that largely fits that quadrant. All right, so with that now, let's talk about the tactics, all those ingredients. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to Jazz, and she's gonna take us over that.
Great. Thanks so much, Maria, for taking us through that. And this is, like Maria was saying, another helpful tool. So please feel free, before I move on, to take a screenshot of this slide or ask us for it later. And we hope that you'll keep this this graphic for your future Medicare for All campaign planning. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about some tactics that you might utilize in your campaign. This is going to be kind of a rapid fire, so stick with us. We just want to cover a ton of different tactics, what they are, briefly how you do them. We are going to this is a non-exhaustive list, but this is what we're going to very briefly talk about. And we're going to go kind of in order from starting with tactics that do not involve a high level of escalation. And we're going to work our way up towards tactics that do involve a fair amount of escalation. All right, so here we go. First, a door-to-door canvas. This is where you and a group of volunteers literally go door to door, knocking on doors in a given neighborhood in your community, engaging people in support of an issue. So you talk to folks, and at the end of your conversation, you should end it with some kind of call to action, right? Can you make a phone call? Can you sign our petition? Can you sign up to join our campaign? Can you come out to our upcoming event, right? This is a great way to build public pressure on your elected officials, to also grow the power of your movement, since every single supporter that you identify becomes, potentially part of your campaign. Planning a door-to-door canvas, it can be really simple. It just usually involves choosing a neighborhood where you'll go knock on doors. Sometimes it involves cutting lists of doors to knock, or this is also called turf or walk lists, right? This is also not necessary. If you don't have the tools, you can just go and split people up and knock on every door on the street. It also involves preparing some materials, like you can see in the pictures here, like some clipboards, some printed sheets, with maybe a script or petition sheets and some pens. And that's really all you need to do a successful door-to-door canvas. Let's talk about another kind of crowd canvas. We like to call this crowd canvassing, or some people call this street canvassing. It's just like door-to-door canvassing, except instead of going to houses in a neighborhood, you and your fellow volunteers, you stay stationary at a high foot traffic location, right? Some people, like I said, also call this street canvassing. Some good locations for an event like this include places like a farmer's market, a shopping center or downtown area or park. And same thing here as door canvassing. This is a great way to build public support and pressure, since you're asking folks in the conversation to take some kind of action with you. And you need similar materials, some clipboards, some maybe printed petition sheets, and some pens, and that's really all you need. The next thing we're going to talk about is a phone bank. A phone bank is where you gather a group of people together, right, in person or virtually, to call through a list of people. You might be calling people from what's called the voter file. You might be using an automatic dialer, or you might just be manually calling through a list of supporters in a spreadsheet. Honestly, Either is totally great. A phone bank can be used for many purposes, from turning people out to an event to driving calls to your elected official. To organize one of these in person, you just might need to find some space, right? Reserve a room in a community center, or maybe hold the event at your house. To organize a virtual phone bank, you just need a Zoom or other video meeting link. And some basic materials you need for this are a list of people to call and a script for what to say on the phone. And that's really all you need. Another tactic we're going to talk about is what's called text banking. So this is becoming more popular over time. This is where you and a group of people gather together like a phone bank. Can be also in person or virtually, but instead you're sending large numbers of text messages, which frankly we're finding more and more these days works even better than phone banking sometimes. This might be a list of supporters that you have already. It could again be voters from the voter file. Text banking is can be done on your phone, but there's great platforms out there so that you don't have to use your own phone to just send text messages. You can use your computer on a lot of these platforms. When we organize text banks with NNU, with our campaign, we use a platform called ThroughText, which is a part of a company called Get Through, and we really recommend that. Looking into it, it's you can use it for other attendees can send out hundreds of text messages in a very short amount of time, and then have one-on-one conversations on their computer with the over text with the people who reply. Another thing you might consider in your campaign is what's called a car caravan. This is where you and a group of people gather together to then drive a specified route together like a parade. You might decorate your cars or otherwise just draw attention to yourselves and your issue. Car caravan might often start or end at a high visibility location, maybe your elected official's office, for example. A car caravan is really great for publicly shaming or pressuring your target. So if you're doing a campaign that's, when Maria was showing us the quadrant, maybe a pressure campaign, these can be good for that. And it can also be a really wonderful COVID safe tactic. We utilized these a lot in our campaign at NNU during really the height of COVID. And they are really simple actually to plan. It often just involves choosing a preset route. Where do you want to start? Where do you want to end? And how do you want everyone to get there? Communicate that route to everybody. And then you would just really choose a meeting spot, get the word out, decorate your cars. It can be as simple as that. Okay, another tactic you might consider is an educational event or a forum or a panel. This is where, of course, you're educating the public on why they should join your fight for Medicare for all. You could show a film. You could gather a group of experts to speak. You could facilitate a public discussion on the issue. This tactic can be great for building public support if you feel like that's needed in your campaign strategy. It can also help to with a pressure or a political cover strategy type as well. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about, and again, I apologize, we're going quickly through these. We want to make sure to get to our small groups. Next thing we're going to talk about is what's called a legislative visit. This is when you and a group of people, usually constituents of an elected official, gather to have a meeting with your target or with their staff. This can be done in person or virtually. A legislative visit gives you an opportunity to get your target on the record on where they stand on an issue. They can also directly ask questions, and you can directly address their concerns or their questions. And it gives you the chance to demonstrate directly to them the level of support that there is for an issue. This might sound intimidating if you've never done something like this before. I really, really want to promise you this can be so easy and simple to do. For members of Congress, all of us here have a member of Congress, right? They all have district offices, and the literal purpose of district offices is to have meetings like this with constituents, and of course, many other things they do. But oftentimes you can just call up the district office, call on the phone, say that you are with a group of constituents who are focused on organizing for Medicare for all. You want to meet with your member of Congress. They will often say yes. It can be not too hard to set up a meeting. And beyond that, you just need to put together an agenda for your meeting and assign some roles for who's going to speak on which agenda item. That can be as simple as that. So really encourage folks to pursue this if you haven't done it before. It can be very empowering and very effective. All right, so next we're going to talk about letters to the editor. Some people also call these LTEs. This is when these are letters that appear in the opinion section of a newspaper. Same thing here. If you've never done this, it can feel intimidating. I promise you, any person in your community can submit an LTE to your local newspaper. It can often give you an opportunity to spread your message to a large audience, and can also be a useful tactic if you want to publicly shame or call out your target, if you name them in the letter. And if this can be as easy as going to the website of the newspaper you want to write to and just looking on the opinion section for instructions on how to submit a letter to the editor. Okay, we could say a lot more about how to do all of those things. We don't have time, unfortunately. We just wanted to give you a kind of surface level overview of thinking about all these different kinds of tactics. And these are the ones I've just covered that you might consider before you move to escalation. Now, the next three things I'm going to talk about, you might consider if it's time for a bit of escalation. Okay, so petition signature delivery. If you've been gathering petition signatures in support of an issue, you can make a really big impact if you publicly deliver all of those signatures in a really big way, right? You can notify the press that you're doing this. You can even hold a press conference. We'll talk about that in a second. This is a great tactic if you are looking for a pressure strategy or a political cover strategy. You can put all your physical petition signatures in a box, like the folks here on this slide, and physically deliver them to your elected official's office. You can also do something more symbolic, like digitally, just delivering a letter with a link to the digital signatures that you have as well. Next, we are going to talk about what a press conference. This is another great way to draw public attention to your target. A press conference, same thing here. I just really want to emphasize, if you haven't done something like this before, it can be way easier than you think it might be. It is simply an event where you invite local press to hear speeches from your group. Usually this would be to announce something newsworthy, right? Like maybe the petition signature delivery. You've gotten 1,000 petitions, right? That can be newsworthy. But it could just also be, something else that's just news, right? Maybe your member of Congress told your group they're not going to support Medicare for all. That's news, right? You can turn that into a press conference and say what you're going to do about it. A press conference, like I said, might sound hard, but truly anyone can do this. You can make this as simple as gathering in a park or on a sidewalk in a public place, give some speeches. You don't even need a microphone. And invite your local newspaper, call them, invite them to come, and that's a press conference, right? Ahead of the event, ideally, you'd write what's called a press advisory. This is basically just a document that says what you're going to talk about. And there's some great information online about how to do these. And then you would email that press advisory out to your local newspapers, TV stations, things like that. And then you should just keep following up and calling to make sure they got it, make sure they're going to come. And after your event, you might send what's called a press release. And this is where you say what just happened at the event, and you send it out to all those same newspapers and TV news stations. If you are persistent enough, you can get your local news to cover your story. Okay, so next we're going to talk about packing town halls. This is where you and a group of people gather together to attend an event, maybe in person, maybe virtually, where your target might be present or paying attention to, and you can publicly display your support for an issue. Maybe your representative's organizing a town hall where they're taking questions from the audience. Get a bunch of people to go, line up during the public comment, ask questions about Medicare for all. If you're doing this virtually, you might figure out how to get in the public comment queue on Zoom or however that's happening. Okay, so then finally, we're going to talk about the three final tactics that might be the part of the most escalation that you might consider in your campaign. Okay, rally or march. I don't need to tell you guys what a rally or a march is, but we'll just say it's where you gather as many people as possible to show the strength and power of your movement. You have to be ready to do this when you feel like you've really got a peak amount of engagement and support, right? We don't want to have a rally with like 12 people there. This is a real kind of escalation tactic when you've built a lot of support. It's great for a pressure strategy or political cover strategy. It shows your target just how far reaching your support is, right? To organize a rally, you can often just choose, again, a public event space, like a public plaza or a park, right? You often don't need a permit for something like that, but I will talk about that in a second. To organize a march in the streets, you do normally need to secure a permit, or at least let your local police department know what you're planning to do. It can't hurt to at least call to make sure that you know the procedure if you don't want your march attendees to risk arrest. You can also avoid this step by doing a march on a public sidewalk, and you're always legally allowed to do that. Aside from that, organizing a march or a rally sometimes involves securing some speakers, right? And then just focusing on doing a ton of outreach to get really good turnout. That's really the key to this tactic. You might also create some posters or some signs for your attendees. And that's pretty much what it involves. Okay, let's talk next about direct action. So especially if your campaign has reached a point where escalation is needed, direct action can be very effective. A direct action can be anything from a sit-in in your target's office to physically blockading something with your bodies, maybe taking over a freeway with a march, blocking traffic. It can be what's called a die-in action, where you and a group of people demonstrate dying, quote unquote, by laying on the ground and often blocking some sort of space. In general, a direct action just means that you are directly using your power, either through economic means, right? Like a boycott can be considered a direct action, or with your physical bodies to draw attention to your issue and pressure your target to respond. It's worth noting that sometimes arrest is a possibility during direct actions. It's also worth noting that in organizing, and there is technically both non-violent direct action and violent direct action. At NNU, we will never condone or accept the use of violent direct action, but non-violent direct action can always have a time, often can have a time and a place where it can be really effective. You can see some great direct actions we've done over the years with nurses on Medicare for All. So we'll talk about the next one now. This one's called bird dogging. Tell me in the chat if you know what bird dogging is. If you haven't heard of this, you might be like, what the heck is that? It's a funny name, but bird dogging is a tactic where one person or a group of people approaches your target physically in person, unannounced in a public space where they're not expecting you. You might ask them about supporting your issue on the spot. You might be trying to get an answer from them on the spot, right? Bonus points if you have someone behind you recording you on the interaction on a cell phone. This is a pretty simple tactic, but can work very effectively. Remember the activist who approached Senator Jeff Flake in the elevator in the bottom picture here during his vote to confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. This was an example of bird dogging. You can do this tactic either by planning it in advance if you know where your target's going to be, or you can just take advantage of it in the moment, right? Like when activists have bird dogged elected officials, when they just like see them at restaurants or in airports and things like that. Okay, so that's a lot of tactics we just went through. Those are the examples of some that you might use in your campaign, but this is just a starting point. It's definitely not an exhaustive list. In fact, I'm sure that you all could come up with additional tactics right here. So please do go ahead and type your ideas in the chat. Any more tactics that we are missing, please type them in the chat. Bill, did you have a tactic you wanted to share out loud? Oh, that's Tim with your hand raised. I'm sorry. I saw the wrong person. Tim, did you want to share your tactic idea? I think we can't hear you. I'm sorry. Shoot. It shows that you're unmuted, but okay, Tim, if you want to try for now to share in the chat, we would love to hear what you wanted to add. I'm sorry about that. And Norman says parade. Love that. That's another tactic. If anyone else has other ideas, please feel free to share them in the chat. And I'll just say in the meantime, if you ever want support in your campaign on any of these tactics that we covered today, you're welcome to reach out to Maria and I, our campaign team, directly. We're going to drop our email address in the chat. Oh, Maria got it. Thank you so much, Maria. You're welcome to email us if we can support you, if you want to talk more about any of these things. And you can also sign up to join our email list by clicking the link that we put in the chat if you want to get involved. Tim, I see your question. Put the smart slide up again. Tim, if you don't mind, we want to keep moving with our the rest of our presentation. So if you don't mind emailing us at the email address that Maria dropped in the chat, we are happy to send you that slide via email. And thank you for that question. I think we should also have time for questions at the very end too, if folks have them. Okay, thanks everybody. All right, I'm going to pass it back to Maria. We're going to do a quick example for everyone, and then we're going to do our breakout groups. So take it away, Maria.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jasmine, for all that information. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and start talking about power mapping. So now in any campaign that you build, another essential skill to learn how to do is how to build a power map. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go in depth on this today because this workshop is focused on strategy, tactics, and escalation, but we'll go ahead and drop some of the resources that we have in the chat so you can learn more about this skill if you would like. Thank you, Jazz, for taking those. Please take a look at those links we're going to be dropping and make sure you save them on your end. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and cover the basic definition. Building a power map helps you understand the political lay of the land and the circumstances you are in. In other words, it helps you understand the power dynamic of your campaign. A power map will help you answer the question, who has influence on your target? Where do you have influence? Where do your allies have influence? And where does your opposition fall on the map? Most importantly, it will help you and your local groups more clearly reveal the path to win. It will inform the strategy you choose, the tactics you pick, and how and when to escalate if needed. In just a minute, we'll show you the power map and how it can look like. Okay, so let's talk, for example, Representative Marcy Kaptur as a concrete example. Representative Kaptur is a Democrat in Congress representing the Ohio 9th District, which spans across a section from the Northwest Ohio, including the city of Toledo. Marcy used to support HR 676, which was the old Medicare for All bill. And then for some reason, in 2018, she stopped supporting Medicare for All. Rep. Kaptur was first elected in 1983, and she consistently wins her elections by huge margins, in part because she lives in a solidly blue district. She's white, Catholic, and the longest serving woman in the House of Representatives. She's the daughter of Polish immigrants, and her mother was a union organizer. Sometimes she can seem progressive. She initially supported Bernie over Hillary in 2016, vocally opposed NAFTA because of its impact on US labor and the Dodd-Frank Act because it wouldn't break up the big banks. But sometimes she is also very moderate. Back in 2010, she wouldn't vote for the ACA until she was assured that it wouldn't fund abortion. We should know that her stance seems to have evolved dramatically. Now, All Pro-Choice America now gives her a consistent 100% rating. Her district is an example of a great district to run a local campaign in, and we could probably move her to support again with the right power map, the right strategy, and the right tactics. If we take a look at what groups are in her districts, we find that there are a couple groups we will call core allies. Groups like the Cleveland DSA, Northwest Ohio DSA, and a strategy group in Ohio called Single Payer Action Network, SPAN. Then we also have potential ally groups. In this category, we'll put groups such as the local NAACP chapters, United Auto Workers, or UAW, and the Amalgamated Transit Union, or the ATU, and the American Postal Workers Union, APWU. Labor has a lot of influence in this Rust Belt district. Some of these unions both support Medicare for All and endorses Kaptur. One important note we want to make about labor unions supporting Medicare for All, national union support is usually a bit of an approximation. Sometimes as a national or international union will support, but the union local won't be supportive and won't be active. Sometimes the opposite is true. Maybe there is really progressive union local, even though the national union doesn't vocally support that much. Either way, you can consider national endorsement to at least be an approximation. And then, in addition to that, you should do more research or talk to folks on the ground in your district to get a better sense of where the union local is at. Okay, so power map for Ohio now. So now in this slide, you can see an example of that power map. We're using this template, which was developed by our friends at Healthcare Now. In this diagram, you can look at the horizontal axis to see that we have a range of support from strongly support all the way to strongly oppose. And on the vertical axis, we have a range of influence from not influential at all the way to very influential on our target. To make a power map like this, you simply need to do some research to find out who the key players in your community are and their relationship to your target. You identify the players and then place them on the map where you think they belong. And once you're done with that, you'll have a nice visual of the political landscape in your community for your campaign. And you'll be able to better map out a strategy moving forward. In this instance, since we see that the group tend to form a line going from bottom left to top right, which is not what we want a line going the opposite direction with most of the power on our side. In other words, we want an arrow going from top left to bottom right. That means that we'll need to do some work to move groups in the middle to become more supportive and organize to help groups in the bottom left gain more power and influence, which is represented in this power map by the red arrows. So that's our goal. Our goal is to move the middle players to the left and the bottom left players up. So if we are going to design and execute a campaign in Ohio 9 to do so, what will our goals, strategy, and tactics be? So taking into consideration some of these details about the political terrain in Ohio 9 district, we can conclude that in order to move Representative Marcy Kapur to support Medicare for All, our campaign strategy should focus on, number one, moving our potential allies, which is the NAACP, UAW, ATU, and all the other unions into a more active coalition with us. And number two, building up the power of our core groups, the DSA and Ohio SPAN. Okay, so based on this analysis of the district, you might decide on a medium term. For example, our goal from that first point is increasing active support from labor unions in captured districts. We know this goal is SMART. You are looking to support from a specific organizations, that means it's a specific. You'll know if you achieve it, which is measurable. We know these unions are friendly to our cause, which means it's attainable. And this is something we can definitely do, so it's realistic. And it's something we can do at a specific amount of time, so it's time bound. So remember those SMART goals. And since Kapur is not currently a supporter, but we know the public is with us, we know we should come up with a pressure strategy. A potential strategy for this goal will be to engage these unions or the labor councils they are members of to pass resolutions in Medicare in support of Medicare for All and send letters to her office once they do. All right, so now the last but not least, what are some tactics we could choose to fit into our strategy of getting these unions to pass resolutions and send letters to her office? Go ahead, throw some of your ideas in the chat. Think back to the tactic list and share any from the list that you working in. And so let's take a look. Anybody have any ideas they would like to share? No, everybody quiet. If I'm gonna move on, but if you think of any while I'm speaking, by all means, please go ahead and show them. Oh, wait. Okay, so We got the power map, a goal, a strategy, and some tactics. A well thought out campaign plan to get Marcy Kapoor on the bill. We might add more to our overall plan than just this part, but this is a great start. Now, all we need is to literally just put our plan into action and get it done. Pretty easy when you break it down, right? Okay. I know that was a lot, but the good news is now we get to move into the breakout sessions where we can all start talking about how we put all this information into practice. We'll have about 15 minutes in the breakout rooms, and each room will be given a unique worksheet with a prompt describing a potential situation where you might need to plan and execute a campaign plan. With your group, you'll need one person to step up as a note taker to fill in the worksheet, and one person that will need to step up as the facilitator, which is basically just entails reading out the questions on the worksheet and making sure the group is spending no more than 3 or 4 minutes on each of the questions. Your group should read the prompt and decide if the situation described calls for a hero, pressure, or political cover strategy and why. Then you should flesh out the strategy a bit more. Then you should choose a list of 2 or 3 tactics that you might be able to execute. You should also write out why you choose those particular tactics. Finally, you should put your tactics in a timeline.